Greetings, this is Willie Muhammad with National Network View. The annual crowning event of Black History Month is the Nation of Islam Saviour's Day Convention and the keynote address. This year's format was broadcast virtually online. Plenary sessions were conducted that covered a wide range of topics. Here's a clip of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's passionate message after viewing the new documentary on vaccines produced by Robert Kennedy and Abdul Malik Saeed.
Satan is like that too. He wants to put needles in our babies. Tell him. Not today. You say, but there are certain vaccines that are necessary. Yeah, they are. But we don't trust you. I think we should pool our resources and get what is necessary for our people and for others, because we cannot let you use your smile and your smooth words as you stick in our children with needles that contain death for them.
Yes, right.
I thank Mr. Kennedy for such a brilliant documentary. I thank our minister, Abdul Malik Saeed, for his part in the documentary. And I thank Mr. Kennedy for allowing it to be shown for the first time at a plenary session under COVID-19, socially distanced and people doing it viral in their own homes.
Here's another clip of Student Minister Ishmael Muhammad delivering a message to celebrate the birth of a Savior.
Master Fard Muhammad knew that his servant, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, would need a helper. So before he left, a child was conceived. Before he left, the child that was conceived in the womb of his mother was born. Before he left, he answered a prayer of his servant that his servant had not yet made, because he was still being taught, made, shaped, fashioned, formed, breathed into, and being prepared by the master teacher for a mission that he had not yet laid on his shoulders. When the helper was born on the 11th of May, 1933.
To view more on this year's 2021 Virtual Saviour's Day Convention, visit NOI.org. Thank you. So, brothers and sisters, on February the 20th, Reggie Wood, relative of Raymond Wood, along with attorney Benjamin Crump and the family of Malcolm X, held the press conference revealing the contents of Raymond Woods, who was an undercover NYPD officer who was used to infiltrate the black organizations and to work to lead them into activities that would be used to discredit them and their movement.
Under the direction of my handlers, I was told to encourage leaders and members of the civil rights groups to commit felonious acts.
In this deathbed letter, Mr. Raymond Wood talked about how he was used in the plot that resulted in the death of Malcolm X.
This letter details the FBI, and the NYPD's involvement in the assassination of Malcolm X.
Joining us to discuss this revelation and the impact of this letter is our brother Reggie Wood, relative of Raymond Wood, and brother Demetric Muhammad, the author of the book, Did Y'all Kill Malcolm X? Thank you, brothers, for joining us today. How are you?
Great. Thank you for having us.
Yeah. So,
Wonderful.
brother Reggie, my first question will be to you. You know, I recently came across of a clip where the daughter of Raymond Wood, named Kelly Wood, is questioning the legitimacy of the letter. So what's your response to this accusation?
Well, I understand that she wants to protect the legacy of her father. However, Kelly did not interact with her father for 10 years. She came back into his life a year before he passed away. And now she is armchair quarterbacking on what it is that he wanted to do. He trusted me. I took care of him. I brought him from Charlotte, North Carolina, where she lived, and they were in a feud, and brought him down to Tampa to live with me for 10 years. And it's odd that she said that I was a distant cousin when we're on the same Costco card, and I'm the emergency contact on his apartment complex that I put him in when he moved down.
Wow. Thank you for that response. And I will go to my brother Demetric. You know, when I heard her questioning the letter, how much that she feels that it's not legitimate, brother Demetric, I wondered how much of this was influenced by her concerns of her father being connected to a plot that ended in the death of one of our heroes. So, brother Demetric, as a historian and author who has intensely researched the manipulative tricks of the U.S. government, how should we view Mr. Raymond Wood in light of this recent revelation?
Well, I think that the discoveries of Mr. Reggie Wood, as it pertains to his relative, Mr. Raymond Wood, are very extraordinary. They are confirmation of what many of us in the Black community have known for many years, that when sincere Black men and women saw fit to organize themselves into various organizations, whether they were civil rights organizations, Black nationalist organizations, or even religious organizations, we see a historical record of the heavy hand of the United States federal government, and in the case of Mr. Raymond Wood, the New York City local government, to intervene to disrupt our legitimate activities as we were organizing ourselves, being filled with righteous indignation to challenge oppressive systems that negatively have impacted Black life in America. So I think that these revelations are extraordinary, and I think that they should be viewed as confirmation, because I sympathize with all of those who are involved based upon what Minister Farrakhan has worked tirelessly for many years, and that is a healing in the Black community. We have not known publicly the suffering of Mr. Woods' family. And so now Reggie Wood, and even to a lesser degree, Mr. Raymond Wood's daughter, are coming on to the public scene, and yet we see the ugly, heavy hand of government and how it has introduced suffering into their family, as well as it introduced suffering into the family of the Shabazzes, the family of Minister Farrakhan, the family of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and the family of many unknown brothers and sisters who may not have even known that their family members may have been arrested, imprisoned, or even assassinated, but their family members were left to put the pieces back together, not knowing the truth of what the government did to destabilize and to destroy Black groups who were sincerely trying to improve the condition of our people. So I think Minister Willie, Minister Farrakhan's call is right, that we need to come together as a people and demand that the files of NYPD Bossi be opened, that the files of the FBI be open, that the files of groups like the ADL and even the CIA be open, so that Black America can move closer toward healing among one another.
Apologize. My next question is to you, Brother Wood. What was your view about Malcolm X's death prior to this revelation, and how has this revelation impacted your view about his death and all of the circumstances revolving around it?
Well, I was born in '69, so I didn't know a lot about what happened with Malcolm X at the time. I'd seen the movie, as everyone else has, and I've read about him in the history books. However, I didn't understand the caliber of what he was telling me until I started doing my own research and putting the pieces together, that he had actually, the things that he was saying actually matched the history books and matched what Garrett Felber was saying, what E.J. Rochelle was saying, what Josh Davis, another historian from the University of Baltimore, and I reached out to those guys to try to corroborate everything. I also hired Lisette Salado, who was a criminal justice major. She has a degree in criminal justice, and she's a graduate student, to do the research for me. And we started matching the pieces on a whiteboard, and it really came to light when all those things happened. But the expressions that Ray had when he was telling me this information, he was very serious and very sincere. You could see it in his face that he was very distraught about it, and he wanted me to make sure that I listened to every word he was telling me.
Wow, and that's something. And in the memoir, you talk about how those moments and how he wrestled and the guilt that he actually experienced. Brother Demetric, before we go into our first 15-minute break, in our conversations, you talked about how we have to even look at our brothers and sisters who've been manipulated by the U.S. government or even local law enforcement in a certain light, even with compassion. Can you talk about that?
Yes, Minister Willie, as a student of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, I noticed that part of Minister Farrakhan's unique history is that even in the midst of some of the darkest moments of Black history, the minister is always able to elevate us to see the hidden hand that is always at work as seeking to make brothers and sisters enemies of one another. And I remember the minister giving a beautiful exegesis of scripture. He was referencing the 94th Psalms. And in the 94th Psalms of the Bible, it has a verse that is relevant to our conversation today. And it asks a question. The psalmist asks a question to God. God, can you have fellowship with this government that is a throne of iniquity, that makes mischief by means of its laws or statutes? When Mr. Reggie Wood was reading the letter from Ray Wood, one of the most powerful things to me that he read was when it talked about how Mr. Wood, and we know that he was only one of others that was hired by NYPD to actually encourage members of civil rights organizations to commit felonious crimes. Now, everybody knows that there is a problem in the Black community today with felon disenfranchisement. The fact that many young Black men and women go to prison, and it appears to be double jeopardy, because even after they have served their time for a felony conviction, they return home to their family members and their communities, having their voting rights stripped from them, not being able to get certain types of employment.
Yes,
so
sir.
I think it's extraordinary that this revelation is a potential defense of many Black brothers and sisters, that not just talking about the assassination of Malcolm X, but it shows that in America, the power of government has been misused to unfairly arrest, imprison, and destroy Black, brown, and even poor white people.
And Brother Demetric, let's hold on that part right here, because we're going to go to our first break and we'll be right back. Thank you all for tuning in to National Network View, and we're going to pause for these brief announcements.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps us to highlight solutions for a brighter tomorrow. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
This is Sister Sajda Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajdahouse.com.
The hashtag #BankBlack social media campaign made strides not only in revolutionizing how we bank, but also how we think. The movement inspired thousands of African Americans across the country to transfer or deposit millions of dollars into Black-owned banks. These are banks that will invest in urban communities, employ African Americans, support Black businesses, and inspire Black home ownership. This is a very proud moment for our culture as we are taking small, but significant, steps towards building Black power through Black wealth.
Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel at National Network View. I am Anissa Muhammad with nnvnews.com.
For 56 years, the Mozambique Elijah Muhammad, the Nation of Islam, and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan have been accused of being responsible for the death of Malcolm X.
Sister Betty Shabazz and her family has not recovered. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad's family has not recovered. My family has not recovered. The Nation of Islam has not recovered. And Black people have not recovered from these terrible wounds.
So, Brother Demetric, this question is to you. You know, amends were offered, just rightly so, to the Shabazz family, to the members of the Panther 21 families, and to the men who were unjustly incarcerated as well. Should amends also be offered to the family of the Mozambique Elijah Muhammad, Minister Farrakhan, and those hundreds and thousands of families that were ill affected by the death of Malcolm X, who were members of the Nation of Islam?
Certainly, Student Minister Willie, I believe that the Nation of Islam and our name and our reputation deserves to be cleared, because when there is statements such as we referenced moments ago, that the New York Police Department paid some Black people to encourage other Black people to commit felonies and crimes. Well, when those Black people committed those felonies and crimes, we now know that in many of those instances, they were not doing it because they had the desire to do it, but they were doing it at the insistence and the encouragement of forces within the government. So I think that we now are at a place where we can begin to call for justice and to clear the name and the reputation of Black people in America, the Ray Woodses of the world, all of those who may have been used by a government that had the idea and the purpose of destroying the movement for justice and liberation among Black people. As the movie that just came out referenced the famous COINTELPRO memos regarding preventing the rise of a Messiah among Black people. Mr. Hoover considered Malcolm X to be a candidate for the Messiah. He considered Stokely Carmichael to be a candidate for the Messiah. He considered Dr. King to be a candidate for the Messiah. And he considered the most honorable Elijah Muhammad to be a candidate for the Messiah. So based upon his consideration of these men, he then pursued the destruction of these men personally and the destruction of their movements. So yes, Minister Willie, we all deserve to be repaired for the damage that our government has done to us.
Okay. Mr. Woods, this next question will be for you. Is actually a two-part question. It's going to probably lead into that 30-minute mark, which will be the end of your time with us. So first, how can people who want to get access to the memoir, where can they actually get it from?
The memoir is available on Amazon. They can go on Amazon and purchase the memoir. I put everything in the memoir, and what people need to understand is that at the advice of Mr. Crump and the fear that the government would come after me for having this information, I didn't know how to put it out. I didn't know if I should just go to the government and give the letter to them and tell them the story. So I was advised to put everything that I knew into this memoir and publish it so that the world would know at the same time. And that's the purpose of it. If you want to know what Ray knew and what Ray told me, then take a look at the memoir. You can get it at the library as well. If you can't afford to purchase it, you can go to the library and order it at your local library. I made it available to the libraries so that everyone would have an opportunity to know what Ray Wood was thinking and what he went through and what the government put him through without me being at risk of them trying to quiet me.
So even with you putting this memoir out, your family and your life is in danger as well, right? And the last two questions, this is for you, my brother Woods. In the memoir, it talks about how after he was used to infiltrate, just the whole situation with Malcolm X, that he thought that his work as an undercover was over with, but then he was also used to go and infiltrate other groups as the Revolutionary Action Movement and the Black Panthers movement. Did he share with you what his missions were that he was assigned to do in those movements?
It was the same thing. Discredit, find evidence that the government could use against them. If he couldn't find the evidence, then fabricate the evidence.
Wow. And my last question to you, I'm learning of Ray Woods because of this revelation, because of the letter, because of the memoir. But as a relative, and you said he actually lived with you, you took care of him. Who was he as a person?
He was an amazing guy. He was amazing. And he got even better after he told me this story. He got that off his chest. He was amazing. He attended every graduation of my children. He was there for Sunday dinners with us. He attended the beach outings. He just wanted to be a part of a family that actually cared about him. My daughters transported him back and forth to his cancer treatments. I transported him. They took him when I couldn't. And he was part of the family. And even Lisette Salato, who co-wrote the book with me, she's a good friend of my daughters. And as teenagers, they remember him driving them to the teen club. He drove 50 miles an hour on the highway and scared them to death, but he took them to the teen club, and he didn't go home to come back to get them. He sat outside in the parking lot and waited for them to come out. And it was funny because when little boys would come to talk to him, he'd come strolling over and say, "You girls ready to go?" So he was a good guy. I mean, I can't say anything bad about him. He just wanted an opportunity to live. He really did. And I think that was part of the turmoil that he had with his daughter, in all those years. She didn't understand him. She didn't understand why he was so closed in about a lot of things. And they had a lawsuit going back and forth with each other. That was crazy to me.
Mm-hmm. And for those who get the opportunity to read the memoir, you will see that there was a period where Mr. Wood wanted to stop. And you're going to read about the dirty trick that the actual government did to keep him in that position. And as we go, before we go to our next break, I want to give Brother Demetric this question. Brother Demetric, what does this memoir mean for all of those other books that have been written about Malcolm X, the books by Carl Evans and the others? What does this mean?
Well, I think, Minister Willie, that so many who have looked at the assassination of Minister Malcolm, they came at this assassination already with a bias and a prejudice that made their works very hostile, especially toward the Nation of Islam, which, in my humble judgment, is equally victimized as Mr. Woods' family was victimized, the Shabazz's family was victimized. And I emphasize the point that in Black America, we have looked at one another as enemies as a result of what the government did to turn us against one another. So I think any researcher that does not emphasize that whether Ray Wood was involved, whether Talmadge Hare was involved, whether all of these persons that historians have made infamous over the years, above all of the wrongdoing of the individuals from the Black community, is the hidden hand of our government. And I close that point by referencing something that Dr. King said in a little known speech he did to his organization, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. They were asking Dr. King, what did he think about the young people who were at that time rioting in the streets? And Dr. King said this, he quoted Victor Hugo, when Victor Hugo said that when darkness is created, crimes will be committed. He said the guilty one is not the one that commits the crimes, but the one who created the darkness. And he went on to talk about how it was the white power structure in America, the federal government, that he created the darkness that was the precipitant of lower level crimes by individual Black people in our communities. And I think that what Dr. King said yesterday is applicable today, especially in the case of these new revelations by dear brother, Mr. Reggie Wood, as it relates to his relative, Mr. Raymond Wood.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And Brother Reggie Wood, thank you for joining us. And once again, for those who want to get the memoir, you can get it on Amazon. But we thank you, brother, and keep us posted about what's going on. And we're going to go to our next break. Thank you all for International Network View.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps to combat false media. Cash App NNV News.
This is Sister Sajda Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. As we renovate and restore the former home of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, we have recycled the old copper gutters and downspouts and created a 1 ounce 39mm coin made of 100% pure copper. Each coin is professionally graded and has its own barcode and registration number. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajdahouse.com.
Worldwide, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Download the Final Call radio app and take us everywhere. On your phone, on your computer, on your tablet, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also log on to finalcall.com and click the Listen Live button, or finalcallradio.com. Final Call Radio, the official voice of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam.
Thank you for tuning in to NNV News. Please share your thoughts with us in the comments section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel, National Network View. This is Clifton Muhammad with NNVnews.com.
We're back, and thank you all for joining us again. And we have with us our special guest, Brother Demetric Muhammad, author, researcher, and student minister. You know, in addition to this government having a role in the death of Malcolm X 56 years ago, we are now witnessing a distortion of his legacy, where he's being transformed to be into a civil rights leader.
Well, Minister Willie, I think that is a
potentially explosive new information involving the assassination of civil rights activist Malcolm X 50 years ago today.
Yeah, we see. So now I'm coming to that question, Brother Demetric. So can you take a moment and talk to us about the danger of this distortion of Malcolm X's legacy and his position?
First of all, most who study the 60s as historians situate the work of Minister Malcolm and the Nation of Islam as being a part of the nationalist movement and the Black Power movements, not necessarily a part of the civil rights movement. So I think that that is a part of how oftentimes history is revised based upon the agendas of those who live in contemporary society. And I think that going all the way back to the early 1990s, we see Minister Malcolm and his history being resurrected from ignominy to become an icon of Black youth during a period of time where the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was gaining a lot of momentum and doing something that no one believed he would be successful at doing when he started. And that was the rebuilding of the Nation of Islam. And so at that time in the early 90s, we saw Malcolm go from being pariah, go from being scourged and condemned by mainstream America to being celebrated, venerated, and honored. And as a result of my research and my study, Minister Willie, this was deliberately done because the powers that be could not identify a worthy opponent that they could get behind to compete with the magnetism and the growing appeal of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, especially among the youth. Wow. And so Malcolm was exhumed, you could say, to be an opponent of Minister Farrakhan. And it was at that time in the early 1990s that you had this propagandist campaign to associate Minister Farrakhan's name with Minister Malcolm's assassination. Wow. So I think it is very dangerous for historians who do not have the best interests of the Black community at heart to begin to corrupt Black history such that we put advocates for the Black community at odds with one another. To do such is to do the work of the enemy.
Now, in your book, you also highlight an example of how the FBI attempted to use their agent provocateurs to create a conflict between the Nation of Islam and the Black Panther Party over the Muhammad Speaks Sales. Can you elaborate more on this?
Yes, Senator Frank Church in the early 1970s convened what is now known as the Church Committee. And the Church Committee is how the general public, how we first learned of COINTELPRO. You have to remember that even though many of us talk about COINTELPRO and J. Edgar Hoover's dirty deeds, you know, they are household terms in today's world. But back in the 60s, when so much of this was actually taking place, many in the Black community, especially in Black organizations, did not have knowledge. And if they had any knowledge or inkling that the government was trying to sabotage them, what they knew paled in comparison to what actually was being done. And so at the conclusion of the Church Committee hearings that was investigating the FBI and the federal government's nefarious role in domestic espionage and censoring groups who were dissident against government policies of oppression, we find many eye-opening and revealing things, especially about the government's work to destroy the Nation of Islam. And in that slide that you showed, it showed that it came out in the church committee hearings that at one point they tried to cause a war between the Nation of Islam and the Black Panther Party. Bear in mind, the Black Panther Party were armed. And so we understand then that if you're trying to create a war between a group that is armed, then you have to anticipate that there will be bloodshed, there will be violence, that there will be death. So that's just one example, Minister Willie, where we can show that even while we were in the Black community, crying for unity, trying to find ways to come together, it was our very own government that was working to keep us apart and actually hiding their hand as they sought to make brothers enemies of one another.
Interesting that you use it with hiding your hand. I found out that today Fat Joe actually some years ago did a song called The Hidden Hand. You can check it out on YouTube, but it was inspired by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan asking the artist to actually to do that. Now I want to ask you this next question, because in your book you point out something that I don't really hear a lot of people talk about, that there was a previous failed assassination attempt on the life of Malcolm X, that as I read it, it sounds very familiar to what we know happened to Fred Hampton. Can you talk about that?
Yes. According to the reports and what we published in our book, in the late 1950s, I believe it was in 1958, it was during a period of time where Malcolm and the Muslims in New York City were having clashes with the New York City Police Department. And of course, Spike Lee portrayed one of those incidents when the police beat up Brother Johnson, ex-Hinton, and Malcolm and the brothers. They go down to the police precinct, and that's a very famous scene that has inspired so many of us as Black men who always yearn to be strong, who always yearn to be stand-up brothers. You know, that scene was very powerful. Well, according to some of the historical records that we read, we saw that in the immediate aftermath of that, the police began to target Minister Malcolm. And we talk about in the book that they had come to the home where he at that time was sharing a home with Brother John Ali, who went on to become the National Secretary of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. But the police came looking for Brother Malcolm, and they shot up the area where his little office was. They harassed his wife, the wife of Brother John, and it was a very terrifying scene for the sisters that were involved. But it is now viewed as a first attempt to assassinate Minister Malcolm. So when you take that piece from the history and you add it to what Mr. Reggie Wood shared from his cousin, then we see more of the confirmation of what Minister Farrakhan has said over the years, what people like Dick Gregory have said over the years, what Professor Smalls, James Smalls have said over the years. All of our great ones who have been acutely aware of the hand of the enemy, these new revelations serve as confirmation for the things that we have known, as well as for the things that we have had a healthy speculation about.
And I had the opportunity to hear an interview that you did earlier last week, yourself and Dr. Wesley, and you brought up a very interesting point in response to what one of the callers. You really called out, I don't want to say hypocrisy, of just the audacity for people to question and get upset because now the Nation of Islam has put forward in this discussion a body of work entailing our side or our view and what we know about this whole history between the Nation of Islam and Malcolm X. Can you talk about why it is important for the Nation of Islam side to be heard?
You know, Minister Willie, I feel very honored to have been blessed and guided by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan to publish the first published work coming from the Nation of Islam that is authorized and approved of to represent the viewpoint of the believing men and women of the Nation of Islam and our leadership as it relates to a response to the propaganda that has always sought to paint us as being responsible for Minister Malcolm's assassination. And so I think it's very important because there are many people who have believed the Muslims killed Malcolm X, that the Nation of Islam is responsible for Malcolm's assassination. And so as we titled the book, they frequently ask the question, hey, but didn't y'all kill Malcolm? Some people are very sincere because they believe that, but they believe that because the information that they have had up to this point has come from sources that are hostile to the Nation of Islam. Let's remember, as I document in the book, long before there was a Black Panther Party, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam had been targeted by the federal government. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad was imprisoned for his preaching in 1942. Our founder, the great Mahdi, Allah in person, Master Fard Muhammad, he was imprisoned in Detroit in the early 30s. So being targeted by law enforcement agencies, the Nation of Islam has experienced this since our founding. And so we know that a narrative has been spun from these hostile sources to negatively prejudice our own people against us. And so I feel very happy that we now have in printed form that which can give those who are sincere and those who really want to know the truth, they can now read our perspective. They can now see our analysis. They can now consider a work from a source that is not hostile to the Nation of Islam, and it is not hostile to Minister Malcolm X. One of the first sentences that I put in the book, Minister Willie, is that I want to demonstrate that in order to love Elijah Muhammad and Louis Farrakhan, you don't have to hate Malcolm X. And in order to love Malcolm X, you don't have to simultaneously hate Elijah Muhammad and Louis Farrakhan. Through a proper understanding of history and through a possession of actual facts, we can have love, respect, and honor for both.
Yes, sir. And thank you. So we're coming right up to our 45-minute break, and we'll be right back. So we thank you all for tuning in to National Network View right after these brief announcements.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Greetings from National Network View. This week's Final Call cover story headlines, "The Shock of the Hour." As Texas was overwhelmed by crippling snow and freezing temperatures, other parts of America suffer from extreme weather, which led to the loss of lives and property. But the question is, are these conditions coincidental, global warming, or are we witnessing the divine chastisement of Allah on the United States? Winter storms brought snow, ice, and plunging temperatures across the southern plains. This attack caused a power outage in Texas that stretched its frigid fingers down the Gulf of Mexico. The Final Call number 21 edition middle page article by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is a transcript from his message, "The Divine Destruction of America, Can She Avert It?" To read more, subscribe to finalcalldigital.com and tune in to the all-new Final Call Radio. This is the nnvnews.com Final Call cover report.
So we're back, and thank you all for joining, returning to National Network View with our special guest, Brother Demetric Muhammad. You know, Brother Demetric, we know that one of the goals of the FBI was to prevent the rise of a Black Messiah who could electrify and unite the masses of Black people as shown in this clip. In your book, you quote the words of the former attorney, William Kunstler, who, when speaking about this objective of the FBI, he said that today the leader who can electrify and unite the masses is the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So can you talk about how this term, the Black Messiah, applies to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and what does that mean in relationship to the forces that oppose him?
Minister Willie, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, for the past 40 years, has been the most magnetic, the one leader within our community who's had the greatest appeal among the widest cross-section of our people. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is the one leader who singularly has had opposition from the most powerful forces within America and the world, that being primarily the federal government and the leadership of various Jewish organizations. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has been mocked. He has been censored by the U.S. Senate. Now, Hoover's use of religious language, we argue in our book, is a result of his close association with the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith, which he sent out a memorandum commanding all of the FBI field offices to liaison and to cooperate and collaborate with the various offices of the Anti-Defamation League. And we know that within the ranks of Jewish spiritual belief, there is a great expectation of the Messiah. So when Mr. Hoover used that language, we believe he used it advisedly because he had some idea that the suffering of Black people in America was such that there are important and relevant parallels to our people's suffering and condition to the condition and the suffering of that group of people that are referenced in the Bible and the Holy Quran as the children of Israel. And at that time, he believed that a Messiah would be born among us. And we can say today, as Mr. Kunstler said, that when you look at all of both the scriptural descriptions of a Messiah, as well as the fears of the U.S. government, like Mr. Kunstler said, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan fits that description. And so for the past 40 plus years, Minister Farrakhan has been a target of sabotage and destruction from these Jewish organizations, as well as from the federal government.
In a recent interview with yourself and Dr. Wesley again, you talked about something that's very critical. And you talked about how the FBI in their files are basically bragging about how they created the fraction between Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam, and they're bragging about the death of Malcolm X, about their actual role in it. And why do you think that this isn't highlighted as much as it should by those who want to pin this death on the Nation of Islam, and even by some of the others who actually write about the death of Malcolm X?
Minister Willie, the recent celebration and conversion of Minister Malcolm X into a pop culture icon has been based on a foundation of the love of Minister Malcolm but the hatred of the Nation of Islam. And this is very unusual, and in its unusualness is an indicator that it is a propagandist device, because no one who enjoys apples as a fruit that's a part of their diet could turn around and say, I don't like apple trees, but I like apples. No one would love the juice of the orange that gives them vitamin C that strengthens their immune system. No one would enjoy orange juice and turn around and say, but I hate orange trees. So when Malcolm was brought back into public life in America, as he was reintroduced, as he was put on a postage stamp, as his legacy was sanitized for mainstream consumption, at the same time, the very community and the very leader that produced Minister Malcolm, propaganda was created to demonize this group. So the net effect, again, was to love the fruit and to hate the tree that produced it. So because of this, all of the evidence of the government's hand in Minister Malcolm's assassination as the orchestrators and the architects of his assassination have been downplayed, have been marginalized, and in many cases have been hidden. So we think that these facts have to be screamed from the mountaintop so that our community will no longer be plagued by the internecine conflicts that an absence of the knowledge of the government's role in our people's undoing has given rise to. So you see, not only is that memo there where they say that Malcolm's assassination is an example of the success of COINTELPRO, but you also have on that slide a memo from 1964 where Mr. Hoover simply says, do something about Malcolm X. In the summer of 1964, many people don't know, there were riots in New York, as well as in Rochester, and white merchants, some Jewish merchants, had their stores vandalized, and the owners of these stores were attacked. And these attacks were blamed on the preaching of Malcolm X. So you see there a direct line between what was taking place among the white merchants who were suffering as Black people began to express their anger at economic exploitation in Harlem. You see a reaction coming from the federal government, which is extraordinary, because we know that the suffering in the Black community has never really caused the federal law enforcement agencies to issue forth memos that do something about those that have victimized us. But when it was the white merchants in Harlem, Mr. Hoover sent a memo, said, do something about Malcolm X, because he, as well as many writers who were writing in the Jewish press, they were saying that we are suffering now, and it is a direct result of the preaching of Malcolm X.
And thank you for that response. And this is the last question. I want to close out on this because we kind of opened up the show with this. So from your perspective as a historian, what is your response to Miss Kelly Wood questioning the legitimacy of this letter? And we'll close out on that particular question.
You know, Minister Willie, I am a student of Minister Farrakhan. And what I learned from Minister Farrakhan is to always look for the hand of Allah, God. And I learned from Minister Farrakhan, I believe, how to defend our people. Why is it placed in the scripture, Minister Willie, that Satan had the power to make a convert a twofold child of hell? Why is it placed in the scripture, Minister Willie, that at the end of this world, one of the descriptors of Satan as a beast and a dragon was that he is the accuser of our brothers and sisters all day and night. I think that this government has gone among Black people and sought to make us stool pigeons, Uncle Toms, turncoats, Judases. And so some of us, members of our family, have played that part. But I believe that in the final analysis, Allah God will vindicate even those that were used by satanic forces to be enemies and agents of the destruction of their own people. Again, the scriptures say that when Jesus was being crucified, hanging there on the cross with Jesus were criminals. And the criminals, you know, Jesus promised at least one of them, according to my reading in scripture, that he would be with him in the kingdom. So sometimes when the public views certain circumstances and situations one way, God's perspective, thankfully, is altogether different. So I'm sympathetic to all of our people who were involved in some way, shape, or form in this very painful chapter in Black history. And I think that just as Minister Farrakhan has always done, we must not look at the little criminal acts that individual Black brothers and sisters have carried out, but we must look at the big criminal acts that these governmental agencies have done, that, as Dr. King said when he quoted Victor Hugo, they created darkness, and that darkness naturally gave rise to criminal activities. So our prayers are with the families of all who were directly affected by Minister Malcolm's assassination, and our prayers are with Black America because we all have been indirectly ill-affected by the assassination of Minister Malcolm X.
Yes, sir. As usual, brother, thank you for taking your time out to come here and to share your expertise, especially on this critical topic. So thank you, man. May God continue to bless you. Thank each and every one of you all who are watching us here on National Network View. This is your brother, Willie Muhammad, and we'll see you again next time.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.